All right, and we are live. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. This is the first time doing, well, I say the first time, but there was another time that I had done this roundtable, and this was a while back. But before we get into that, I need to play, of course, a couple audio clips to give thanks to my sponsors. So hold on just one moment, and we're going to go through this right now.
Rapid Deploy is the CAD of the future. It's cloud-aided dispatch, not dinosaur computer-aided dispatch that looks like it was built in the 1980s. Rapid Deploy's cloud-native CAD, mapping, and analytics increase situational awareness for call takers, dispatchers, and responders. Rapid Deploy is taking public safety by storm. It's fast and easy to deploy, with implementation in days, not years. It's affordable for all agencies of all sizes, rich in features, functionality, and data. It's also reliable and secure as we use Microsoft Azure Government Cloud. Go to rapiddeploy.com to learn more.
Has taught you something, opened your eyes to what it's like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Exclusive bonus content, one of a kind swag, discounts on merchandise, and 2 bonus podcasts within where we visit past guests, and Open Mic Live, a live stream show where we share funny dispatch stories. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. If you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now for the show. All right. And now we're about to start this. I did get, if you look in the bottom right hand corner, I did get a chance to get a new logo in there for the Dispatchers Roundtable. However, not an intro song. Not yet. The next one, I'll be able to do that. So, again, thank you, all of you, for joining us here tonight for round one of the Dispatchers Roundtable. And I have to give thanks and a shout out to a good friend, the late Gary Allen, who was the editor in chief of Dispatch Magazine Online. He was the one actually who helped me out in the very beginning. I sent an email to him for what I was doing with the podcast and my idea for it. He shared it on his website. And because of that share and his interest and him really digging the idea of sharing stories and all of this that I was trying to do, I ended up surpassing the goal for the podcast, and it really pushed it forward. Episode 43, I had him on, and it was the very first version concept of the Dispatchers Roundtable to have myself and a panel to have a few other people on to discuss some topics, and I was able to capture his story. Thank you, Gary, for that. I will always remember it. So here we are years later. It was 2014 when I first did that episode 43. It is now 2020. And again, this is the Roundtable, Dispatchers Roundtable Round 1. This live broadcast is sponsored by Rapid Deploy and supported by INdigital, a leader in next-gen core services. And we're going to be talking about some stuff that is going on right now in the world, COVID-19, and also the virtualization of 911. But with the pandemic, how centers are responding to it. I've got 3 excellent panelists, and I want to go ahead and start with introductions. So, April, if you would please start us out here.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm April Heinze. I'm the 911 and PSAP Operations Director for NENA, the 911 Association. I have been with NENA for just about a year now, coming up on my 1-year anniversary. And prior to that, I worked 24 years in a PSAP in Michigan, Eaton County. Give a big shout out to Eaton County Central Dispatch. I started off as a telecommunicator and worked my way up to director there. I was recruited out of the PSAP to work for an NG 911 core services provider and spent 3 years as an industry affairs specialist and then director before I went to work for NENA. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much for joining. And Brian, please, your introduction.
Yeah, sure. I'm Brian Crumpler. I'm a regional coordinator with the Virginia Information Technologies Agency. I've been here for, I guess, about the past 7 or 8 years. Before that, I was with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. Most of my background before joining here was more on the GIS and mapping side of things. But again, in my current role, I support 911 centers in Northern Virginia and the Washington, D.C. area, directly support the directors in that area and what they're doing. So pleasure to be here today.
All right. Thank you. And Kent.
Hi, I'm Kent McKenzie. I'm currently the 911 director for the Lake County, Illinois Sheriff's Office. Lake County is sort of situated nicely between Chicago and Milwaukee. So we get the worst of the winter weather and the fun times in Chicago, too. Prior to leading 911 here, I've been a county emergency manager here in Lake County and worked in emergency medical services, emergency management, and 911 for Orange County, North Carolina, where Chapel Hill is, and for Granville County, North Carolina. I trace my dispatching roots back to being a high school volunteer with the rescue squad in Bluefield, Virginia, where we didn't have 911 at the time, so we answered the 7-digit phone number and dispatched our crews out with the old plectrons. So glad to be here this evening.
All right. Well, welcome all of you to, again, this first round of the Dispatchers Roundtable. We've got a bunch of people already in the comments saying hello, and those saying hello to you here on the roundtable. I can put one up here. Actually, there's someone right there that says, "Nice mic, Kent." Very nice.
That's our trusted Motorola repair technician, so he's always keeping an eye on me.
Very cool. So like I said in the beginning, I am going to keep an eye on the comments and everything that are coming in, and I'm going to try to put them up there so that you can see them like that as they're coming, and just as we go along with this. So with everything that's going on right now in the world, we have got this pandemic. We've got COVID-19, and I have been watching a lot of not only the news, just like everybody else, but a lot of what's going on in our industry. And recently, and this was always a thought in my mind as well, what happens if there is some sort of exposure or something in a dispatch center? What happens then? What's the process? Do people come in and start cleaning right away? Do you end up separating, your dispatchers into a different building? How does that work? And Kent, this recently happened to you at your center. So if you could, for those not only here on the panel, but for those who are watching, I mean, what was that even like? Take us through that day, that moment, how all of it was going on and came about.
Yeah, that was certainly a day I will not soon forget. That was Friday, March 20th. That morning, late in the morning, had a phone call from one of my telecommunicators who had gone home feeling a little ill the day before and had stopped to see his family physician. And they conducted testing for COVID. He let me know about that. And then when we got the call the next morning, I was told, unfortunately, that the COVID test had come back positive. And I wasn't exactly sure what that would mean. So I immediately called our command staff. I also told the people on the floor what we had found out, because I'm a big believer in sharing information as quickly and accurately as I can with my staff. I think information is critical for them to be able to take appropriate actions. And then my next call was to the health department to figure out what exactly we needed to do. The good news is, for about 10 days prior to that, we had already been taking some pretty significant precautions in our center. We had already been doing distancing. We had forbidden close contact. We were sitting at every other position. We were sterilizing, wiping down each position every shift. We had paper towel holders temporarily installed on all the doors so that you could take a paper towel and use that to touch the doorknob so that you wouldn't be contacting potentially contaminated surfaces. So from that perspective, we were doing some of the right things, some of the things that I've appreciated seeing in NENA's guidance and some of the other guidance that we've seen after the fact. Unfortunately, we were maybe a little bit ahead of the curve, so we had to learn by some mistakes as well. Once we talked to the health department and talked to our administration, we made the decision that rather than potentially contaminating more of our staff who would be coming into a center where this COVID positive telecommunicator had been working, we would pull the pin on our backup plan, which is, I call it a plan, but it's more a loose concept of how we're going to work together with some of our neighboring PSAPs. Fortunately, our friends over at CENTCOM, which is physically about 8 miles west of our center, were accommodating. They share the same telephone system and network that we have, though they're not on the same CAD. And we were able to send our afternoon shift 2 telecommunicators to CENTCOM to be able to start answering our calls. Typically on afternoon shift, we would have between 5 and 7 telecommunicators working in our center. So that takes care of 2 of them. Then we needed to find a place where we could man the radios. So we pulled our command trailer out of storage, and our fleet services guys did a spectacular job of getting it up to snuff. And we were able to move into that for our radio dispatch functions. It ended up taking us about 3 hours to make the move out of our center. Our day shift staff stayed over and worked some extra time. Here's a photo, it looks like, that shows our command post and some temporary internet cables being dragged out to it. So you can get an idea. We're fortunate that we had the space. We already had shorelines for the power, and we had network connections that weren't too far away from the trailer itself. And in the trailer, we were able to establish 2 dispatch positions, one in the front room and one in the back room, and keep our telecommunicators separate from each other. Once we had dispatch operations working outside of our center, we had brought in a professional hazmat cleanup company, only people we could find on short notice, to come in and disinfect our center. They suited up in level C, fully encapsulated suits with purified air respirators, and went in. We had to make sure that every single piece of electrical equipment in the center was shut down. And I think I made the comment that walking into our center and seeing all of the screens dark, all of the lights off, was the most apocalyptic thing I've ever seen. It was like something out of the Day After movie. So this is the crew suiting up to go in and do the cleaning. They used essentially it's a concentrated bleach fog solution that goes through the air and settles on all the surfaces. And then they wiped everything down. It took them about 3.5 hours to do our center, our office, and the adjacent emergency operations center that's part of our complex. Then they stripped all their used PPE off and bundled up all the rags, put it in a big 55-gallon drum, and labeled it hazardous waste, and said, "Y'all can go back in a couple hours." I was like, well, that's good to know. So we made plans for our day shift the following morning, Saturday morning, to reoccupy the center starting at 6:30 a.m. And under health department guidance, we also began wearing, at that time, N95 masks, and taking and recording temperatures for every staff at the beginning of their shift, at the end of their shift, and then optionally halfway through the shift, and documenting all of that and sending it all to the health department daily.
Jeez. Man, so as you're talking about this, and I'm throwing the pictures up there, and you're talking through that as well, I will admit I got goosebumps listening to you talk about this whole process, because that's scary. That's some scary stuff right there. Now, there is a picture where it looks like a couple of your dispatchers are sitting in maybe a training room, and there's a bunch of stuff set up. So let me go ahead and put that picture up as well.
Yeah, so what we've done kind of to carry on from the initial cleaning is to try to further protect our staff, is to actually separate our staff into 3 completely isolated platoons. And the folks you see in this picture are working in what used to be our sheriff's department training room. That's actually in Waukegan, which is our county seat. That's about 10 miles east of our regular center location out on the shore of Lake Michigan. And working with our IT department, they were able to scramble, set up 2 CAD positions with the 8 monitors. We had some radios that were staged as part of our interoperable communications cache, and we were able to put the 2 Motorola radios there to be able to actually turn this into our dispatch. function. So we have 6 telecommunicators, 3 for day shift and 3 for afternoon shift, that are assigned to the Waukegan location. And then the rest of our staff is split between people who are assigned to our trailer or to our main center. Each of those locations has their own thermometers, their own supply of masks, their own headset jack interfaces. So people were able to take their own headsets to those locations. And we've worked really hard to make sure that there's no contact between people in those different cohorts. So nobody who's working in Waukegan has any reason to have any contact with anybody who's working at either of the 2 sites here in Libertyville.
Gotcha. So how did that affect everyone, I guess? How does that impact the center? How does that affect those that are working? I mean, the stress level already is high because it's 911 to begin with, but where does it go from there? I mean, I can only imagine that it just keeps going higher and higher and higher. And then you have to think about, the mental health and wellness of those of your dispatchers. I mean,
Absolutely.
you
So
navigate that.
yeah, it's not like I could pick up a book that's pandemic for the dispatch center.
Right.
And, but I was I was able to think about information I've gathered in 25 years of emergency services management and leadership, and think about what I would want if I were in the shoes of a telecommunicator in this position. I'd want to have as much information as I thought management had, and I'd want to know I was being taken care of. And when we made decisions about what we were going to do, we always made them based on what would be best for our telecommunicators. That's the single part of our 911 system that is not replaceable. We can buy new computers if they get toasted. We can buy new telephones. We can buy new radios. I can't go down to the corner store and buy new telecommunicators, particularly the seasoned veterans that we have, that we're blessed to have here in our center.
Right. Can you imagine, though, if there was a store? There'd be no short staffing. That'd be the easiest thing. You have it in all different levels. And like a vending
Indeed.
machine.
Yeah, so I know that the anxiety has been really high
Yeah.
for our staff, and I've spent a lot of time. I generally have a policy of, if you need me, call me. I have, this is probably the first time in a long time that my office door here in the office has actually been closed, so that nobody staggers in while we're on the phone call here. But people call me. I had a handful of telecommunicators who were very anxious, who would call me on the cell phone and just find out what's going on. What did I think was happening? I connected them with the physicians and nurses over at our health department so they could hear the same information that I was hearing and understand that the decisions that we were making weren't arbitrary, weren't intended to be punitive in any way, but were intended to help protect them. And, in the 2.5 weeks now, nearly 3 weeks since we had that exposure, we hear a lot of appreciation. I hear a lot of appreciation from my staff, and we've also been able to share that information around our area and around the country. So hopefully, the things that we did right, people can repeat, and the things that we did wrong, people can learn from.
Now, April, with NENA and everything, kind of building on the situation that Kent has gone through and is still really going through as well. What is it that, I guess, what is your take on this, and what is it, some of the resources that NENA has put out there, not so much in response, but in general, if something like this were to happen, which it has with Kent?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Kent, it sounds to me like you've done an outstanding job with your staff. Good job, guy. You got thrown a really big curveball there, and you did everything you could to take care of your staff, and that's all you can do. So way to go.
Thank you.
And I definitely think we're going to learn from you. We have, when this all started, NENA decided that we were going to try to put together, just start pulling together as many resources as we possibly can for the PSAP community, because this is unlike anything we've ever dealt with, right? We did have a few scares back in, a few years back. And we did a little bit of pre-planning for those. I can remember when H1N1 came out and we actually shut the PSAP down and didn't allow anybody in except for my staff, and we cleaned and did stuff like that. But nothing to the level we're at today. And it's totally unprecedented, right? So for all of us, we really are learning from each other. Well, we created a resource page off of the NENA website. It's nena.org/COVID-19. And we have a whole cache of various different resources. Those resources range anywhere from, we've got webinars out there. We've got a place where you can share your experiences. We've got human resource documents, preparedness and continuity of operations documents, templates. We've got PSAP policy development and guidance and protocols and call handling, cybersecurity, public education, tips for GIS, for chapters and event planners on how to, because we've got a lot of conferences that we've had to either postpone or cancel for the year. Personal assistance, stuff from our international community, and general information resources. This page gets updated on a daily basis. Many of the resources that we update as often as we can. If we learn something or we find that something was missing, we add it. We've got a lot of stuff. We've even started putting things on here in regards to wellness, our mental health and wellness for our telecommunicators. Because as this wears on, and Kent is definitely going to be able to attest to this, he's got some folks who are going to really be worried, continue to be worried. And we've got a lot of folks who are continue to be worried. One of the things today we added to our checklist was how managers, supervisors, and peers should be watching for atypical signs of behavior and report those to their management so that those folks can get some help. Because we've got a lot of people out there that are starting to really feel this, and when they feel it, they're actually showing it on the job. And sometimes, I can remember back when I was in the PSAP, if somebody was overly worried or overly concerned about something, people would just go, "Oh, that's just so and so. They're just a germaphobe. They're just a this, or they're just a that." Well, that is a sign or a symptom of something else, something greater. We need to be thinking about that because it's about the health and wellness of our folks. And this is not going to go away tomorrow. This is something that's going to be here long term for, we're talking at least several months. And we're going to have to really think about that and how we're dealing with our folks. Identifying critical incident stress management support. Ensuring that if you have an employee assistance program, your staff knows about your employee assistance program and they know where to go to get help if they're feeling it, right? If you have peer support programs, making sure that your peer support program is actively checking in on all of your staff. And if you don't have a peer support program, then you yourself as a manager need to be checking in on your staff and making sure that they're doing okay on a weekly basis. This can't be done just once every great while. You've got to be checking in to make sure they're doing okay, because we need them in that seat. And if their mental health and wellness is not there, they're not going to be there in that seat for you. And that's really important. So we've got a lot of those resources, but if you have resources, if you've done something really innovative, or you think it's something really great that you want to share, don't hesitate to send it to me. My email address is on the website, but I also say it here. It's really simple. It's Heinze, AHEINZE @nena.org. So don't hesitate to send me anything. And if there's something out there that you think we need and we don't have, let me know. We'll do what we can to put it together to make sure you guys have it. So that's our job, is to take care of you, and that's what we're going to do. We've also we did a survey, and I'm sure we're going to probably get to those survey results in a little bit, but we're doing some check-ins. We recently did a survey so we could get a pulse of the PSAPs across the country and how they're doing. And we're going to repeat this survey periodically because we want to stay on top of how our PSAPs are doing. It will be really beneficial for us all as we go through this.
That is one of the things that I do want to touch on here in just one moment. I want to look over here at the comments really quick. There's a couple things that have come in, just some mentions here. So we've got someone out of North Carolina here saying, we have been fortunate in New Hanover County, North Carolina. Our squads are split between main and backup center. And it says our morale is still good, 25 days in, looking after each other and making sure the job gets done. So that is very good. We've got some other comments that are coming in here as well. And let's see, one of them says, I know that there's a lot of concern in dispatch centers with sharing who is positive. Now, this is in the comments. So they say, I know that there's a lot of concern in dispatch centers with sharing who is positive or who has been tested. Does anyone have any procedures in place on how, when they would notify staff of an issue or a potential for an issue within the center? Whoever would like to take a crack at that one.
Well, this is Kent. I can speak to it from what we did and what we didn't have a plan for. We're a relatively small center. We have 27 full-time telecommunicators and supervisors. And our feeling was that if one person is suddenly out on the schedule for 14 days, it's going to be pretty obvious to everyone else in the center that this is an unusual occurrence. So we made the decision, after talking with our leadership, to go ahead and share the name and information about our own telecommunicator. I think that helped our telecommunicators be comfortable. I would certainly recommend that you need to have that discussion with your legal counsel, because it's entirely possible that we could face some negative repercussions from releasing that information within the center. Now, I've talked with our telecommunicator. They understood the need and they were completely on board with that. But in different circumstances, that might have been more of a challenge.
Awesome. And then April, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we do have some guidance for that also on the website. There has been some lax. The feds have kind of lightened up on some of the restrictions, especially when it comes to COVID, on how much you can share. And that is one of one of our tools out there does help with that. And I'm going to find it and I'll let you know what it is here in just a second. There's so much out there, I can't remember everything.
There's a big report and everything. And as we're going through this as well, Brian, if you have any thoughts as well, just on some of the stuff that we've been talking about so far, before we get to, the working remote, virtualization, all of that, any thoughts? Because you work with a bunch of different dispatch centers as well. What have you heard on how some of them are responding to this pandemic?
Yeah, so I for up here, I know we've got a few centers that we've got one up in Northern Virginia, actually where NENA's offices are, up in Northern Virginia, up in Alexandria. And they've actually, there's a good post that Tracy from Rapid SOS put together, where they interviewed some of their staff, and have some photos with that as well, where they put, I think it was 6 or 7 of their staff in their primary center, and had the rest of their staff using shifts in their alternate center. Some of that was to test out their capabilities in their alternate center and to make sure they could use that. Some of it was also just practicality, because things like your primary center has a shower. So things just that you could do that. Also, things like if you have a kitchen, you have just the basic needs that are there. You could convert offices into sleeping quarters, have better space there. I mean, there's things like that that are just small details that you never really consider until you're facing an event like this. Whenever you're like Ken said, you really have to adapt all the tools in your toolbox for this type of an event. You just never really thought that you'd ever face anything like this. You make the best decisions possible. And I think one of the things that they were looking at was if they can isolate people in their primary center and keep those people there for that 10, 14 days, and everyone's fine there, then you also have a skeleton crew that is safe and good. And if something happened to the rest of your staff that's working shifts, you have another staff that could continue to work throughout the event, that if you had to keep it going, you could work it there. So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, one way or the other. Again, that may work in an urban area where you have a primary center and a backup. It may not work in a smaller center. It may not work again, depending on your situation, if you, like what Kent was saying, where you have a radio cache and you have another place where you can do that across the county or across the city. The biggest thing I think is use the opportunity to be creative. Look at the tools that you have in your toolbox, and use those and adapt those to your unique situation and circumstances. I mean, that's really the biggest takeaway I've seen from just all across the country. I mean, hearing different webinars, different people share everywhere. That seems to be the one commonality I'm seeing across the country, is that there is no one cookie cutter solution for this. Right. People are really just applying whatever they've got, and you're coming up with lots of different ideas and solutions. And the innovation, I think, that comes out of this is a really big positive. You've got different approaches and different solutions and ideas, and people are sharing those. And like Kent said, there's some of these that are non-starters that you look at it and say, no, that's a bad idea. Let's not do that ever again. And there's other things that you say, hey, that was a really good idea. How can we modify or tweak this to do this better next time? Or can someone else apply this and make this even better for their center?
Perfect. Now, for both Kent and April, you actually have something on here. But before I get to you on this part, for Kent, what have you seen in your call volume? Has there been any increase? Has there been a decrease? This is not just for COVID specifically, but also with the fact that there's a lot of people that are probably calling about people who are violating the at-home orders. So, your call volume, how has that increased or decreased, or has it just remained the same?
So we actually do a sit rep every morning for our county emergency management, where we look at the total number of CAD calls, the total number of phone calls for the previous day. We compare it to what it was 7 days previously, and we also compare it to the same date of the year a year ago. And we don't notice any significant trend up or down in total CAD call volume. We have seen about 40% increase in telephone calls. A lot of those are people asking, is it okay if whatever? Is it okay if my neighbor coughed over the fence at me? Is it okay if my neighbor walked their dog in the middle of the street versus on the sidewalk? Is it okay that there are people playing Frisbee on the golf course, since the law says the golf course has to be closed, but it doesn't say anything about people playing Frisbee there? So I think a lot of what we're doing is just listening to people. We're not often sending officers out to investigate situations like that. Mm-hmm. We actually, as part of our technology response to this, we were able to speed up our implementation of an online citizen reporting thing. We've never been able to take citizen reports online or over the phone previously. We've always sent a deputy, and we started that with this incident. That's made a huge difference. Being able to take those calls off of the plates of the deputies that are on the street and address them administratively. I would say there's been a pretty significant change in the mix of calls. Obviously, significant decline in traffic crashes and in retail theft and that sort of thing, but more than made up for with the increase that we see in disputes or domestic problems, that sort of thing.
I can definitely see that. People getting kind of that cabin fever and being there with each other, and it just, yeah, it goes to hell. Now, April, in the report that you all ended up posting, there was some information about that as well, and some of the trends that you're seeing in call volume with all the centers that you ended up doing the survey with.
Right. Real quick though, before I do that, I mentioned that the resource on our webpage. It's the COVID-19 and HIPAA disclosures to law enforcement, paramedics, and other first responders and public health. It's on our website. That does talk about the fact that that yes, privacy rules permit a covered entity to disclose protected health information of an individual who has been infected. So it allows for that. Most PSAPs are not required to follow HIPAA because they are not part of an EMS agency. The only ones that are really required to follow HIPAA rules anyways are those who are governed by an EMS agency. Otherwise, HIPAA doesn't really pertain to them, but you really should go and contact your own HR department to ensure that you're following all of the appropriate HR rules. So there's that caveat. Back to our survey. We sent a survey out to all of the PSAPs that are listed in our enhanced PSAP registry and census. And that survey went out to just a little over 9,000 people. We received about 500 respondents from across the country, 46 different states. So we got a pretty decent sampling from 46 states as to responses in regard to call volumes and dispatch volumes and things like that. What we found in our survey was that only about 3% of the respondents actually said that they had a greatly increased call volume. Many of those, though, what was interesting, many of those were taking everything on 911. There was 30% of the respondents that had a somewhat of an increase in their call volumes. And a lot of the folks who responded with that were recently put under the stay-at-home orders. So they were getting a lot of calls questions in regards to the stay-at-home orders and things like that, per the comments that we received. We got about 20% that responded that there really was no change in their call volumes, but then we got quite a few, almost 40%, about 37% of the respondents said they had somewhat of a decrease, and another 15% were greatly decreased. So that was rather eye-opening. And what it boils down to is you don't have as much going on the road. You're not got a lot of people out there creating emergencies. You're not getting the traffic crashes. You're not getting the all of the other types of calls that you normally get on a daily basis. But we did just like, sorry, hang on just a second. Are you still there?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. My daughter keeps trying to FaceTime me, and it keeps blinking out. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. We can still see you.
So,
We can hear you. So
okay,
you're good.
And now I'm going, crap, how do I get it to stop? Sorry about that. Back on track. So it was really interesting to see the varying different survey results. And a lot of these folks in the survey we're basically explaining that most of our call volumes are now more of the non-emergent type call volumes. They're really answering questions, people wanting to gather information, that kind of stuff. They're more the true emergent type calls are truly emergent calls now, where they're, it's an ambulance run, or it's a domestic, seeing some upticks in suicidal individuals, mental health issues, things like that. And so it was very interesting. Now, call volumes also versus the dispatching volumes, it was interesting how the dispatching volumes where law enforcement had significantly gone down and EMS was much higher. That you don't see that in the actual report that was on the survey that we had. But that was very interesting. And then we started looking at it, and what it boils down to is, on the norm, about 80% of a PSAP's call volume is law enforcement calls. All of the normal run-of-the-mill, somebody's lost, or somebody had their car broken into, their mailbox was smashed, they had alarms, all of these things that happen on a normal daily basis are significantly down. And you're seeing a lot more technology being implemented where they can then report those types of crimes and things online, so they don't have to call them in. Or a law enforcement officer is definitely not responding out a lot for anything that's not emergent. They're doing everything over the phone. So the trends were interesting. I can tell you here in my home state and in Michigan, in talking to a lot of the folks here, the call volumes here are significantly decreased. I did see somebody asking about Detroit. That is probably one of the only ones. The Detroit, Macomb County, Oakland County, and Wayne County area, so it's the greater Detroit area, they have the vast majority of cases in the state of Michigan. The remainder of the state has much less of the cases. So a lot of the PSAPs have found that they're in that somewhat decreased to greatly decreased call volume range. And those PSAPs have done some interesting things when it comes to staffing. They have started decreasing their staffing level accordingly to save their staff from having to come into the center. So I was talking to one of the PSAPs, and what they're doing is they're having one person from their shift, even though they've decreased the number on duty. The one person that they decreased from that shift is technically on call for the night. And they are available at home on standby, aren't able to drink, aren't able to, they have to come in at a moment's notice, being paid to be at home on call, and they rotate that person per shift so that it's one less body in the room. It's a little less exposure to the staff. So I thought that was a very interesting staffing way to handle things. I did see a question from Leah, my girl from Michigan, up there in Grand Traverse County, asking about secondary employment with fire and EMS, because we have a lot of PSAPs who have folks who are volunteers for EMS and fire departments. And when they do that, they also have an agreement with you. You are their primary employer. You then give them the ability, you say, yes, they can participate as a volunteer or as a secondary job for those other employments. And a lot of PSAPs that I've heard from have just simply said, we are stopping all outside volunteering and employment. This is your primary position, and we need you to be primarily staffing our PSAP. And they have not seen a lot of pushback from the staff, from those folks. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to get pushback, but obviously, as the employer, you do have the right to say no. And sometimes we have to make those tough decisions. So another thing I saw Tracy say, I'm sorry. I'll stop talking after
No,
this
no,
because
no.
you know me. I like to talk. I saw Tracy say something earlier, and I totally agree with her. I failed to mention the fact I told you all that we need to be checking in on our staff. Sometimes that staff also needs to reach out to their administrators and say, "Hey guys, how are you doing?"
Right.
Because I'm going to tell you, the administrators right now, your directors and deputy directors, your PSAP managers, they are going through hell. They're going through all kinds of planning and pre-planning. Ken, I know you're not going to say this because you're the man, you're the one who is responsible, so you're going to be humble, and I know that, but I'm going to say it on your behalf. You guys are doing so much more right now, so many more meetings and pre-planning, and you're being pulled in 50 million directions and having to make a lot of tough calls and having to deal with what you had to deal with, Kent, was superhuman. And you just don't have, a lot of people don't say, "Hey, wow, way to go." I'm saying that to you. But we do need to do that for each other. So reach out to your counterparts across to the next PSAP over and 2 or 3 PSAPs away, and just let them know what a great job they're doing. And hey, I'm here for you. If you need to call, call me. I'm here. I'm here for you just to vent or to get other ideas or whatever you need. So, all right, I'll stop now.
No, I was just going to actually piggyback off of what you were saying with Leah. There's a comment up here, a few comments up, and I was just saving it at this spot as I'm looking at it to throw it up on the screen as well, because it goes along with with those guidelines. So, Kent, probably for you. So it says, does your agencies have anything in your guidelines about dispatchers also employed by EMS or fire departments due to them possibly exposing your communication center?
So, like many centers, we do have a secondary employment agreement that we enter into with an employee. So they have to submit before they engage in secondary employment, whether that's for pay or as a volunteer. And that has to be approved by our undersheriff or the administration. So currently we do have a little less than a quarter of our staff does have secondary employment. None of them are field responders for their secondary employment. We've got a couple who are one who's a pretty effective realtor in the area. We've got a couple who are doing things for their own municipalities. We do have 1 or 2 who are telecommunicators in other dispatch centers on a part-time basis. And we had some discussions about whether we wanted to say no to that, or whether with precautions we felt like we could manage that risk. Because anytime you're exposing people to other people in this environment, we're going to have increased risk, whether those people are at the grocery store or at your secondary job. And for the time being, we've decided to allow our employees to continue their secondary employment because we don't believe that they're in high-risk situations. Certainly some risk, but not high-risk situations. And we feel like knowing what the cost of living is in the Chicagoland area, that could put a real crimp in our employees' ability to function if they lost some of that secondary income.
Well, I have to throw something up here just so that you can see it. In regard to what you were saying about disclosure and everything else. But before I get to that one, actually, I want to throw this one up here so that you can see it. Because as April was saying, you're going to be humble about it. You get kudos for this, because I think you're probably one of the first ones, or the first one, to put it out there that this had happened. And so right there, Kent is incredible. It's been an easy transition with all of the changes, and I know it's because of all his crazy hard work and dedication to us. We are so lucky to have such an incredible director leading us. So well done, sir. Well done.
Well, thank you. And thank you to Corey, who's actually working on one of our consoles right now out in the trailer. So we appreciate her service. And I have to say, I've got an incredible team here. It makes leading them and working for them a joy. I love coming to work because of the amazing people who are here.
And one of the things too that I had been wondering, and I know we kind of touched on it already, and you as well, but there's a comment here as well that says, I understand that some of us are reacting to non-disclosure as we would under normal conditions. The virus is different. It can impact many, and like Kent, I too would be or would have been transparent with information to allow those that may have been in contact begin to pay close attention to themselves and their families. So it
So I
looks
think
like
that's a great
everyone
point,
is agreeing
Ricardo.
there.
One of the things that we dealt with, and I didn't really mention it, the health department guidelines that we were all given, any of us who had been in the center with our telecommunicator who tested positive, were told to isolate from our family members, to stay separate from them, to essentially not have contact with others. Come to work, wear your mask at work, go home, don't have contact, stay 6 feet away from your family, take your temperature. If you've got any symptoms, here's the number, call the health department immediately, for 14 days from the date of that exposure. So we just last Friday got through our 2 weeks of isolation. My daughter was overjoyed when I got home last Friday night. She said, "Daddy, can I give you a hug now?" And it's little things like that that I think we all take for granted.
Right, for sure. And kind of going back really quick to the call volume. I just wanted to mention a couple things here because it's in the comments. So one person here says our call volume is down 10 to 15%. However, domestic calls have increased, which is it goes along the lines there with you, April, and Nina in your report and how that information has come out. Another person here says, noticed here the log calls are down because the traffic volume is gone. So no traffic stops, fewer to no accidents, and no driving complaints. But it says, so our call volume is a quarter to a third of what it was or what it would be this time of year. So we've got all of this other information that's coming in here as well. But I want to we're coming up on the hour, and we're going to go over an hour here. And I knew it would. And I was telling people we're going to be talking about this, and this is a lot of good information. And people are going to be asking a bunch of questions about this crazy shit that we're dealing that everyone is dealing with, whether you're in the PSAP, whether you're in public safety or you are just civilian out there doing what it is that you should be doing in, either quarantining, just all of that. So there's a lot of this that's coming out. There's more comments as well, but I think we're gonna kind of go back and forth, but I want to move now into this whole idea of virtualizing 911. Um, I have to start this out with in 2014, I had it was late 2013 actually. I had made my switch from dispatch to being an industry partner. So then going into the summer of 2014, what ended up happening was I was helping out with a project in Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, and I'm going out there and I'm training many centers, actually every center out there, their dispatchers on using the backup phone system that our company was providing them. And I was also showing them how easy it would be to get these phones and pack them up into a case and simply carry it out. Where in some places a command center is good, but if you don't have a command center, you can pack up these phones in this case and you can essentially go home, plug it in to an internet connection, and we can send that traffic there and you can dispatch from home. And I would, kind of chuckle and say, how cool is that? Well, then the directors would end up saying, no, 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 don't tell them that because they're going to want to dispatch from home. So that was 2014 and really a thought of how this could work. But now we're years later in 2020, the technology has also completely come full circle. And that is a reality. There are dispatch centers that are doing that, and people are dispatching from home and working remote. There's a bunch of different things that are going on now, and that's where we're at. So it's the craziest thing to think that back then I was joking about it and be like, "Ah, yeah, you guys can do this. How cool would that be?" And really, it's people are doing it, and it's working. So, um, starting with Brian, what are some of the things that you're seeing with the dispatch centers that you work with, how are they doing this? I mean, working out this concept of virtualizing 911.
Yeah. So again, I don't know if I've got the link to the blog post that Tracy put together on Rapid SOS, but she had a really great write up where she interviewed some of our PSAPs in Northern Virginia, and had a great photo in there of one of the dispatchers in City of Alexandria, from literally the kitchen, with the setup there, with literally on the kitchen counter, with radio and console and just basically laptop and everything pulled out there, and set up testing the equipment. And again, both PSAPs have just recently upgraded their equipment in the past few months, and it was something where it's always been one of those ideas that they had mentioned where they want to try it out, but they never really tried it out. And hey, we'll eventually get to it, maybe in a few years or something. And then this whole COVID thing spun up, and it's like, okay, we got to try it out. Let's do it. And so they decided to try it out with a few positions and some of the equipment that they had. And one of the things that was in the article and the write-up was that it was actually extremely helpful, especially for their administrative calls, and some of the extra calls that were coming in. You could have someone jump on at any time and take those extra calls and take some of that call volume off, so that some of their emergency calls could be handled by the staff in the PSAP, and so they could focus on those. But the non-emergency calls could be more focused by some of the staff that's remote. From a technology standpoint, I think what they were looking at was they don't have CAD in the cloud or anything like that, but they were able to set up a VPN, I think, to connect to their CAD. So even though it's not completely virtual, there are still workarounds. So that still ties back to what Kent was saying earlier with you use the tools that you have, you tie those resources together, and you identify, yeah, this may not be quite what I want it to be, but how do I make use of this today? Yeah, we want to identify how we'd like it to be. And yeah, we're moving towards a future direction, but we want to still make use of this however we can. And if this helps meet a need for right now, we're making use of the opportunity. One of the really neat things with this whole event, I know this is extremely stressful for all the PSAPs, and we don't think of neat as the right word with the stress and the craziness that's going on in this. But this isn't a flood. It's not a hurricane. It's not a tornado. It's not an event that is one and done and it's gone in a few hours or a few minutes. It's not a traffic accident that's here and gone. It's something that it's with us for weeks and months. And so with that being said, you've got an opportunity to try things out. You've got an opportunity to look at your technology and evaluate things, evaluate your procedures, evaluate how you're working with your neighbors or how systems work together with each other, what works, what doesn't work. And to really take a look at things. Yes, you need to find something that works for right now for the need, but you're able to apply that and really look at something to say, okay, well, what's the next logical step? Can we get something that's better than this? And can we make a change? Maybe not today, but maybe can we do something next week that takes it to the next step, or next month that takes it to the next step? And if this thing lasts 2 months, well, we're already a month into this. So like Kent was saying, you just had that 14 days. So, I mean, I think there's probably things that you guys were thinking 14 days ago that you never thought that you'd be looking at today. But from a planning perspective, looking at 7 days, 14 days down the road, while you're here now, and what are the things that you can apply today that you were thinking of 14 days ago that you're like, okay, now let's apply those. And looking now ahead, I mean, we're in the beginning of the month, and what are the things that we can look at if this is still going on at the end of April? What are the things that we can apply in May? And we don't know when this gets back to normal, but I mean, the same questions like we talked about, like the survey before with the traffic accidents are down and domestics are up, and questions about the data and potentially more calls with maybe depression or suicidal thoughts of callers. The PSAPs are a source of intelligence and information about what's going on in our communities. And so the role of the PSAP in some ways and the role of our staffs is also changing in this. There's a huge opportunity in this for the directors and your staffs to be eyes and ears for your community in ways you've never been before. That leadership opportunity yes, you guys are leaders, and yes, you guys provide guidance for what's going on in your community, and you provide that leadership to responders in the field. But to be able to say, yeah, this is what we've seen happening on a typical day, but to be able to say, this is now what's happening in this response, and this is what's different. You as PSAP staff, your telecommunicators, your directors, you're the eyes and ears, and you're the ones that provide that intelligence and that insight. And that's a huge opportunity that, again, I don't know that we've ever had in the PSAP world.
Yeah, that is really great, Brian, because one of the things you said, get back to normal. And I honestly want to just add that I think we're going to have a new normal. I think that this post-COVID is going to be a different world. We are, so many governmental entities in the past absolutely no work from home. That is never going to happen. We can't do that, right? Private entities, private businesses have done this for a long time, and it's working, and it works for them. And they find that, guess what? You actually get more productivity out of your employees, because guess what? They don't know when to stop working. They just keep working. That's me. Sorry, I can't help myself. But we have a tendency to overwork maybe a little bit at home. So that may be a downside. But that being said, up until this happened, no governmental entity actually worked from home. And I'll give you my husband as an example. He works for the state of Michigan, and this is totally outside of their entire world, and they started thinking, well, maybe we need to have you write down what you do every single hour of every day. And I'm thinking, why do you have to do that? He's still working. You need to trust your employees. But anyway, I digress. The idea, this new norm is definitely going to be, we're moving into a different world. The more we can virtualize things, think of it like this, like Brian said, you try this out right now. Right now, it's for the health and wellness of your staff, right? But long-term, you could have other benefits as well. In a perfect world, in April Heinze's perfect world, every single call taker or every single telecommunicator in your PSAP could potentially have a box at home that has a radio, that has the telephone equipment and the CAD equipment all there. And all they have to do is open it up, turn it on, get logged in, and go to town, right? Now, I actually had somebody, I mentioned this to somebody, and they kind of went, that's never going to happen. Because, I was just on a conference call the other day, and I heard dogs barking in the background, and you can't have a 911 call taker with dogs barking in the background. I think you have employees who are smart enough to lock their dog in the bedroom or put the dog in the crate while they're working. I think you have people you have professionals that can definitely make this work for them from home. And in the instances like here in Michigan, our biggest worries are big thunderstorms, tornadoes, that kind of stuff that blow through, right? Well, in the past, I can remember myself driving through tornadoes to get to my PSAP because I knew they needed me, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in the future, we don't need to do that. We can literally just open up the case, turn everything on, log in, and say, hey, I'm here. I'm going to start answering phones, and just start answering phones. Amazing what you could do. When your call volumes go up, all of a sudden you have some catastrophic event. You have a major train derailment, because I had that happen 3 times to me. A major train derailment. And now you don't have to have people rushing in. You can just put a text out to everybody that says, hey, We just had this happen. And let me tell you, your staff, if they know they're only going to have to answer phones for 2 or 3 hours, they're going to pop on and they're going to answer phones for 2 or 3 hours. They're going to do what it takes. So there is going to be a new norm. You mark my words. People are definitely going to start looking at this. As long as you can make it affordable for the PSAPs to buy these kits, they're going to buy these kits.
Hey, Kent, question for you with this. How far outside of Chicago are you located?
We're about 45 miles northwest of Chicago itself.
Okay, so how long does it take people driving into Chicago on a typical rush hour?
Well, typical rush hour, it's probably an hour and a half to 2 hours from where we are, maybe even a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
At 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, you could probably do it in 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I'm about 60 miles south of DC, and it's an hour if it's no traffic, like today with no one on the road. But with traffic, it's an hour and a half each way. And we've got people that spend, half of my county loses 15 hours a week commuting. And so, like April was saying, that new normal, I mean, if this thing goes on for 2 months, 3 months, there's a lot of people that are going to look at this teleworking and say, why am I wasting all this time driving back and forth when I can do this from home? And like for me, I mean, where I'm talking to you all from here, I've been doing this for 7 years. My job is completely 100% remote. I may go out for meetings, but I've been doing this remote for 7 years in my job. And so as long as I have email, as long as I have a phone. Now, again, I'm not a 911 dispatcher and I'm not answering those calls, but everything I need to do my job is there because my organization has invested in the technology to be able to allow me to do that job remotely. And that's something where, again, for the 911 industry, if we are, and then local governments, we're investing, like April was saying, investing in what's needed for that, as opposed to sending people 50 miles or 60 miles to drive. If people, especially in the urban areas, like you're saying, Kent, with people having to do 2 jobs to live, if I can live somewhere cheaper and I can still do the same job, why would I want to live somewhere closer when I can live somewhere lower cost of living, still get the job done, and I can answer the calls from somewhere else? I'll take that job. You may actually be able to get more people taking a job in some of these centers that don't have can't get people living there, driving there because of the distance or the cost of living in urban areas. Or I think the issue there is going to be the internet connectivity in some of the rural centers. That's going to be, or rural places where people live. But at the end of the day, I think that's going to end up being a discussion for our communities to say, where do you need to invest in broadband technology, whether it's wireless or wired or whatever, being able to get that connectivity to places where people live. But again, that's going to be, like April said, a new normal. This is just going to rewrite what those priorities are. I wonder how much of our transportation, all the money we're spending on transportation, does any of that go towards broadband or wireless or any of that? How much could get redirected towards that, towards investing and taking people off the roads? It's a small thing, but it's things where if that type of thinking, how do we reevaluate things and reprioritize things? And if someone's not at work, physically at a work location, but they're at home, do I need to pay someone as much because they're not driving back and forth? They're not taking that money for gas. I know for me, I've turned down jobs in the past because that pay more because I get the time with my family. I don't have to have that commuting time back and forth. It's important for me with a 10-year-old, 9-year-old son and with my family, that time is important. So if you've got someone who is just getting into this field or has young children at home or is trying to grow in their career and go back to college or do extended courses or whatever they're trying to build in their life, there's things that are priorities in their lives, and that commuting time back and forth is a cost. And that's something that's important. And if you can get a job that's virtual, it actually is a benefit. It's not a paid benefit, but it is a benefit for the workforce.
Right. And so there's a comment that just came in here, actually. It says, I agree that this pandemic has made us think outside the box. And I'm excited at the idea that we could work remotely, policies in place. It may balance the life of a dispatcher who can work, tend to family, and lower the stress level. So, kind of piggybacking off of that a little bit right there, what do you think it will take to switch up those SOPs, I guess, when looking at virtualizing the operations aspect of emergency communication centers?
So this is something that I've gotten asked a lot by our telecommunicators just in the past 2 weeks is, okay, so why can't we all work virtually? What, I've got a great gaming computer at home. Why can't I just install CAD on it? And, you can forward the 911 calls to my cell phone and we'll be good to go. I think from my perspective, the thing we need to be a little bit cautious about is the ability that we lose or potentially lose when we separate our staff. And that's the across the room conversations, the sidebar. So when there's a really significant call, the telecommunicators are aware of that and they're jumping in and doing things to help each other without being prompted, without having to see something pop up. Now, we've just, with our location in Waukegan, just explored with Microsoft Teams having an open video chat window between the position down there and a position here so that you can see what your partner who's working remotely is doing. We haven't fortunately had a significant incident where we would rely on that camaraderie in the center, but I think there's certainly the opportunity, and the technology is changing so fast. And with the build out of broadband wireless technology, even if the wired internet isn't working at a particular location, in many parts of the country, we're getting to a point where there's satisfactory wireless capability.
It's funny. It's almost as if I shared some of these questions with the four of you already, or the three of you rather, because some of the stuff that I had on here in my notes to ask, you're already talking about it. We're on the same wavelength. This is good because what you just mentioned right here was something that I was going to bring up as well, was the human factor. How does working remote or virtualizing 911 take away from that human factor in dispatch, where when I was in dispatch, if I was on main radios, I would hear the call taker typing fast and hard, even if they weren't saying a thing at all because it's an open line. If they're typing fast and hard, it usually means some crazy shit is about to go down. So how does that work? And you kind of answered that already right there with that platform having the open windows to be able to not only listen but also see what is going on. Where before this was going on, that's what you would do. You would listen to the person across, or if you've got something on, someone always is repeating what the other person or what they're hearing, so that the person on the radio can put it out there and continue going fast, just like that, like a well-oiled machine. But now thinking about people being remote, does this take away from the human factor, or are we able to continue to do it the same way but with technology?
But I think that also goes into the opportunity that you have to reach back to the vendors that are developing this and have that conversation to provide that as an input to say, this is what the new normal needs to be. These are the types of inputs. Can you build that type of the typing speed and how quickly you're inputting that into whatever the software is? Can that be a trigger into the software to say, this is a flag for the people next to you that, hey, automatically turn on that video chat on Teams, or automatically trigger some alarm or something else that say, hey, for a supervisor or someone else that, hey, we got something that's abnormal from what the typical is. There's things that you can build into those triggers based off whatever your typical patterns are. But again, that's all knowledge that's in the head of the staff in the centers. That's where the experience and the knowledge and the awareness of every director and every telecommunicator, and that collective intelligence and that collective experience is so critical. Your observations and your awareness, that's what's going to give us the solutions for the 911 industry. It comes from those observations.
And
You know,
April, I
I
think
asked,
you were jumping in as well. Go ahead.
yeah. I also am going to say that you wouldn't have to do this on the norm, right? If your PSAP is comfortable with having your normal shifts do the normal things, you could still do that, but you could still have virtualization for those on calls, for the fact that something big like this could happen, right? It would be something that each and every 911 is a local issue. It's a local entity. If you are in a large area and you have commute times and the things that Brian was talking about, you may want to look at a bigger virtualization, where when you're in a more rural setting, you may not have as good of internet service in certain areas, and some people will be able to do it and some people won't. But it would be a good mix, right? And especially now, we've got this pandemic. What's to say, God forbid this ever happen again, and I hope and pray it never happens again. But what's to say it's not going to happen again? And we need to be prepared, right? That's what 911 does. We have a plan A, we have a plan B, we have a plan C, and sometimes we have plan D, because we know that every single wheel falls off that truck on occasion, and we need to make sure that we have all of our plans and every duck in a row. So we need to be paying attention to that and thinking about what's going to happen the next time, because when you're prepared, then it doesn't happen. We were really woefully unprepared for this, even though we knew it could happen. Everybody's like, well, it's been far enough away. This isn't going to happen to us. And guess what? It did.
That is very true, and we see that in the news. We see it on social media with people, just posting a bunch of different scenarios, posting different things, the way everyone is dealing with this. One of the big things we kind of touched on it in the beginning a little bit, but more so, as we're talking about, mental health and wellness. How are your dispatchers dealing with this? How is this working? And even in a remote type scenario, um, how do you figure in peer support and mental health and wellness there? I see I had read a comment there saying that it might help the mental health and wellness to be at home, because they're working from there and they're in this environment that they're used to, I guess, being at home. But along with all of that, I mean, and Kent, I guess we can kind of go back to you on this. And actually, I want to share something here. I had someone send in this story, and I want to share this because this is what dispatchers are. This is what they're feeling. This is what they're going through right now, and I bring this up because of the peer support, mental health and wellness, what we're talking about, and how to really respond to it. So I'm going to share my screen here really quick, and I'm going to go ahead and read this because this really hit when this got sent in, and a lot of people were posting and commenting saying, that they kind of feel the same, or that they do feel the same way, and a lot of others feel the same way. And thank you for sharing this, because a lot of people aren't sharing it. So this right here is a story that was shared with me, and I'm going to go ahead and read it right here. And it says, I wake up now every morning and think about what I need to do to get ready for work. I used to eat my lunch out almost every day, but now I have to make sure I pack enough food to last me through 12 hours. But I'm too afraid to eat anything that I have to touch. So it's very limited what I pack or eat throughout the day. I don't bring my usual work bag with me anymore because I don't want to have to bring a potentially contaminated bag back into my house. So I stuff the essentials into my tiny purse, and that's it. I grab my dirty outside world shoes and put them on. I don't listen to the radio anymore to pump me up like I used to. My brain automatically shifts to how I'm going to have to ring the doorbell when I get there, so that my supervisor can come out and take my temperature to make sure that I'm okay to go inside. I then have to sanitize my hands before I can walk in, which are cracked. and bleeding all over because I have to use sanitizer all day. I have to go to my locker and get my headset and my own pen and pad of paper, and starting next week, my own personal keyboard, because we have to have our own individual stuff. We have to have, or we now have to ask, rather, every caller COVID screening questions. Oh, and I also took the call for our first COVID death in the county the other day. I get nervous to have my best friends even standing by me. I don't even want to touch any surface there other than my own desk that I sanitized before I sat down. Everybody is tired. All I want is to be at home where I feel safe. Mind you, I'm starving because, as I said, I won't really eat while I'm there. When I get home, I strip down right away, hop in the shower, disinfect my phone, my watch, anything else that I had on that day that wasn't clothing. Then I can finally sit down with my family. All that, and that doesn't even have anything to do with the job itself. That's the added stress that is bringing to me every day. It sucks. I'm fucking mentally and physically drained. That was a story that was sent in, and those are raw feelings. That's what a lot of people are feeling. So I posted that up there, and I wanted to read this as well as we're talking about the pandemic, the thoughts of working remote, and how people are responding to this. So as we're kind of going back, like I said, we're going back and forth between COVID-19 and the responses, dispatch centers' responses to it, as well as the virtualization of 911. You know, what are your thoughts on the peer support aspect and also the mental health and wellness for dispatchers? This is just one story. I'm sure there's a lot of others who are out there that are feeling the same way.
So I want to jump in real quick on this because there was also a comment on the a podcast the other day from Doug where he was asking, basically saying, if I was a telecommunicator taking calls from home, I'm not sure I want to be the telecommunicator taking a suicidal call at home alone without anyone else around. And I basically said, yeah, I want to bring that one up as well. And one of the things that, again, it's not techno. I mean, again, I want to be the person that's more of a technology person saying this. Technology is not the answer. Technology with procedures, with experience, with the knowledge that you have on the telecommunication side, all of those things have to be combined together to find a solution. Again, if it's just a pigeon with a carrier pigeon that's sending a message somewhere, that's a solution. Fine, use a carrier pigeon. Doesn't matter what the solution is. Find a solution that works. It has nothing to do with servers, virtualization, anything else. At the end of the day, the solution needs to be a solution that works to get the job done, to support what we need to be doing within the industry and for our staff, for the communities that we serve. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. For the mental health side, this also means things like peer support also needs to go virtual. Peer support isn't just about, I mean, yes, we need to have things in person where we can, but just like we're having this podcast live, you can have a peer support team that you could have 3 or 4 people or a team of people that you can say, look, I'm having a rough time. You know what? You have a team of IM 911 is nationwide. How many people are on this podcast? How many people follow this, Ricardo? I mean, nationwide. I mean, you've seen the impact of this podcast, the stories, the people, the raw feelings, the emotion, how much this connects with every single person who does this, not just as a job, but it means something to people individually, because this is a personal calling to be in this field. And there's a passion for people to connect, not just with what they do in their own centers, but to be there for one another. And so the idea of peer support going virtual, you could have something where you've got centers across the country that you look, I mean, my center, if I'm in one part of the country that's not impacted by COVID, you know what? I could reach out to Kent's center that is impacted and be there for his center. And you know what? Whenever Kent's center is is back to normal and everything's fine, my center might be impacted by a tornado or something else, and Kent Center could be there for me. And that's an opportunity again that we have within the community that can go virtual as well.
Kent or April?
You want to go, Ken, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this goes back to the fact that we really have to be thinking about the mental health and wellness of our staff, right? We have to keep that first and foremost in our mind. When I first started in 911, I can remember being told, put your big girl panties on, girl, and keep on going. And suck it up, buttercup. You don't have time for this. You just keep going, right? So we did. We just did that. We shoved it all away. We pretended we weren't affected. We learned to get really hard and crusty, and we kept plugging. But then we had this thing called post-traumatic stress, right? And we all, like it or not, I can tell you that there's probably not a single person in the entire PSAP community that has not had some form of post-traumatic stress based on it's not based on one call, it's cumulative, and it's life experience. It's not just one thing, but it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you someday, somehow, some way. And we have to stop being old and crusty and saying, it's not going to affect me, because it does affect you. And we all have to learn to allow ourselves to feel things. I myself have had to learn to feel things again, and I've become kind of a emotional person at this point, and I used to be. But when I was in the role of a telecommunicator and as a supervisor in PSAP, I never cried. I didn't want to cry. Crying was not acceptable, but it's a very healthy emotion, and it's okay. And we need to let our staff know that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. We have to allow them to feel, to be able to justify their feelings. And that's something that we have to do a better job at, no matter what we're doing. Doesn't matter if we're virtual. It doesn't matter if we're doing the job today. Today is even more stressful. That young lady or young man that sent that, Ricardo, that story, that's a person who's crying for help. They need some help. Somebody needs to give them a place to be able to speak to. They need to have somebody that they can talk to, resolve their feelings, or even just be validated. It's okay to feel that way. It's scary. We're all feeling it. I actually we've been doing a few of these virtual happy hours with some of my friends in the 911 community, and just able to validate each other and saying, no, I felt that, or I totally myself have gotten to that point where I'm like feeling a little pity party right now because I can't go hug my grandbaby, or because I can't go I want to go out and have a few drinks with my friends. Well, I can't go do that. Well, now I'm going to have a pity party for myself. And it's okay. I can feel that way. That's not a problem. We need to all be able to say it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And we need to validate those folks. And we need to get them help, especially if they're crying out like that. They need to have somebody to talk to.
Go ahead, Kent.
So a couple things come to mind from what I've heard other people say and from what our experience is here. First, I think, having people to talk to, whether they're in person next to you or whether they're connected electronically and might be halfway across the country, is just critical. I've relied on friends, former coworkers and colleagues from across the country to help me get through our challenges here. And I've relied on our staff to help affirm when we're making the right decisions and to provide corrective suggestions when maybe we're not doing the best thing. And so I think the sense of family is so critical here. And, we've tried to encourage people to reach out to their peers. There are a number of groups online that provide that level of support. Our department has a pretty effective peer counseling program, peer-to-peer program. But sometimes I think, because I am the manager, that means sometimes people are reluctant to open up and share their thoughts. Just share real briefly from the perspective of our telecommunicator who tested positive and was very, very ill with COVID. They shared with me that they actually thought they were going to die and were prepared for that. Their spouse had called for an ambulance to take them to the hospital, and they refused to go to the hospital because they didn't want to die alone. And then they were concerned that because they had potentially contaminated the center, that they would be personally held responsible for that. Of course, we assured them that that's not the case, but I think we all deep down take responsibility for our actions, and sometimes that can put blame where it's not really supposed to be. This telecommunicator had shared that if anybody else in the center came down with the virus because they had been here, that they were planning to resign and had already listed some of their property for sale so they could leave the area to get away from what they assumed would automatically be a negative outcome. So we've done a lot with that telecommunicator, but with all of our staff, to assure them that we're all still family. We're here for each other, and we understand why they might feel that way, but we want to let them know that there's no reason for them to take that serious of an action.
Now, looking really quick at the back at this report that NENA had put out, as we're on this topic here, there's a portion on here that says 911 professionals have COVID-19 related anxiety. And I'm going to put this up here just really quick. And April, maybe you can kind of talk on it just a little bit here. But there it is right there.
Yeah, we found that there were a lot of PSAPs were already putting various different measures in place when it came to some sort of mental health and wellness for their staff. But there's equally the same number of PSAPs out there that may not even be listed here right now that don't currently have employee assistance programs, peer support programs, or other things put into place. And I highly recommend them, especially an employee assistance program is very inexpensive. It's an inexpensive benefit that you can provide your staff that provides a lot of different opportunities for your staff that you personally can't provide them. However, when you're shopping for an employee assistance program, you want to make sure it actually caters to public safety, because EAPs for private sector and for the normal business related or even other governmental entities are vastly different than what really is necessary for public safety. And I think that that's really important when you're going to look at these things. Peer support programs take a little bit of time and effort to put into place, and there's definitely work that needs to be done to get them in place, but they're definitely very beneficial. We found some other really innovative things that people are doing just to try to help take the stress off of their staff. It's little things like relaxing the dress code. Who'd have thought about doing that? But that's actually a really great idea. When you've got to wear uniforms and all of a sudden you're locked down, nobody's going to see you. Why not relax that dress code a little bit and let people be a little bit more comfortable? Some other things that didn't actually make this list here, but bringing coloring books and pencils, little things that they can do to take their mind off from every single thing that's going on. The coloring books and pencils, obviously, if you're going to do that, you'll want to get one for every individual staff member because you don't want community sharing of that stuff anymore right now. But another thing, implementing video conferencing. Brian, there's your virtualization, right? Allowing staff members who are now further apart to still be connected with one another, because that's isolation. Implementing, while arranging the service animal visits, that's, I think, going to be a little bit more tricky now because of social distancing. We're really trying to keep the PSAP lockdown and things like that. That may be a little bit more difficult. But oh, Tracy's down here saying, buy them a puppy. I like that idea. I'd take the puppy. And it makes lots of people happy. But there's a lot of different things that you can do. Be creative. Allow your staff is, I'm telling you, you have a lot of staff members that are very creative. I can remember staff members that would have a rolling cart that they did a puzzle, put a big puzzle together, right? When it wasn't busy in the middle of the night, they were puzzle people. Just things that that will help take minds off of things is very important. And next week, guys, I know many PSAPs are not going to be celebrating National Telecommunicators Week, which is next week, but make sure you tell your staff how much you appreciate them during that week. I know they're not going to be necessarily celebrating next week, maybe postponing until they can actually do the bigger celebrations and so on. But it's really important to make sure that they feel appreciated. And I think that's all we need to do. I think that's the biggest key factor here, is just ensuring that the folks that are doing the job feel appreciated, because that makes you coming back. Then that helps you to want to come back the next day and to keep plugging away, even though it's difficult.
Well, as we go into the wrap up of this first round of the Dispatchers Roundtable, I want to immediately say thank you to all three of you for joining me here to talk about these very important topics. I'm going to be honest, I've been kind of avoiding a little bit this topic only because I wanted to be able to do it the right way. I wanted to have people on with me who can really talk about this from different aspects of what's going on, because I'm seeing it on social media. I'm talking to people about it, but I can't speak on it as well as all of you can, because April, with the research that NENA is doing, Kent, with the very real face-to-face incident that you are going through, and then Brian, in your position with the PSAPs that you work with and how they are virtualizing 911 in their own aspects. So thank you, all three of you, for joining me, and for everyone who has been in the comments and throwing comments out there. This is going to be up for replay, and people are going to be able to see it. So if there are other questions as you're watching this to throw in there, people can continue to answer even after we are done here. But as we go into this wrap up, as I was saying, I want to ask each of you a wrap up question. And Brian, I'm going to go ahead and start with you actually on virtualizing 911, as we are going into what we're calling this new normal, which is really what it is. It is going to be a new normal on how we respond to everything, how we are doing operations. Where do you see 911 in the from the perspective of virtualizing, and how really can people start getting ahead right now for this whole thing? If you haven't been doing stuff, it's kind of too late, but you can jump on and start doing stuff. But where do you see this going as we're talking about virtualizing 911?
Yeah, so for me, I like to look over the horizon in what I do in my job. So, and not even just my job, that's just where I like to exist space-wise. And there's a great resource, Department of Homeland Security put it out for interoperability, called the Interoperability Continuum. And it looks at things like governance, standard operating procedures, technology, training and exercises, and usage. And it basically looks at how you go from working either individually as individual systems or individual radios or equipment or individual events to how do you coordinate regionally or throughout a nation or integrated procedures and policies and making things work together. And I mean, I really like what Kent was saying. He and I were all chatting earlier today before the call, and how it's not just about one system, not just about radios or CAD or call handling or your procedures or peer support or governance or any one of these areas, but really just evaluate everything that you do in 911 and look at what we do and look at look at all the touch points that we have. How do we connect better to the people that we serve in our communities? How do we connect better to each other in our centers? How do we connect better with our neighbors whenever we're sharing information with our peers? How do we support each other regionally or across a state or across state lines? How do we work better outside of our physical centers? And how do we support sharing information and backing each other up? I mean, there's lots of, just looking at this one chart, for me, this is something that helps me just sort of get my mind around just every system, every challenge that I look at supporting my PSAPs. And it's extremely helpful for me. So again, just beyond virtualization or beyond procedures or beyond policies, this is something that helps me because it goes beyond, again, just beyond any event, COVID, or whatever that next thing is going to be, the next hurricane, the next tornado, the next pandemic, the next whatever it is. It's something that always helps us to say, how do we keep pushing the ball forward? How do we keep imagining for look at where our gaps are, and keep looking for opportunities to make this better. So for me, I think that's something that is a huge opportunity. Again, I really want to encourage everyone listening to this also. I really thank April for hitting on that point of not burying things down. That's something for me personally I've done in my life in different times, and that's not the way to deal with this. And so for finding solutions, if you see a problem with whether it's on peer support, whether it's on systems, whether it's on procedures, on governance, whatever, and you see something that needs to be fixed, whether it's in your own life, whether it's in a peer, whether it's in a system or a way that you do things, bring it up. Putting sunlight on the issues is always a good thing. And if it's on your own life or if it's on a challenge that you're facing, even the post, Ricardo, that you brought up, it's to the core, and it's blunt and it's honest, but it's therapeutic whenever you bring those things up and you share that, and it connects with people, and people see that. And if you're sharing it, there's probably 10 or 20 or 1,000 other people that are thinking the exact same thing that you're thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's how we find solutions to this. We find the solutions because we share those ideas, we share that pain, we share the struggles and challenges we have, and we get to the answers that we need to get to because we come together through that. So that's honestly how I see this working out.
Awesome. Now, April, for you, speaking, for NENA and all, where do you go from here? You've got this report and everything. How can people find more about the resources for COVID-19? And I guess, where do you see it going from here as well?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because the COVID-19 resources page is nena.org/COVID-19. There you go. That's exactly it. Those resources will be listed there for a long time to come. Some of that stuff, once we post-COVID, will likely begin to be put into some standards and or other documentation. So for the next time around, we'll have things in place so that it's a lot easier. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, but planning, it won't happen again.
Right.
So, we'll be doing that. But when it comes to the survey, we put this survey out. I think we started it on March 30th and closed the survey on the 1st of April. We posted our report last Friday and it went out again this Monday. We plan to do another survey we want to start doing it on about a 3-week cycle. So PSAPs are going to continue to receive these surveys from us. They're very quick and easy to go through. It literally took people less than 5 minutes to fill out the survey. But what it does is not only does it allow NENA to get a snapshot of what's going on across the country in our PSAPs, but it allows you, the PSAP, to have a snapshot of what's going on around you. You're not alone. You can learn from each other. We can gain valuable insight from the data that we can gather. And we can ensure that you have resources that we can take that data and move it up and advocate for you at the federal level. There is a whole lot of really great things that can come out of the data that we are going to gather on your behalf, but we need your help. It's going to be extremely important that when you get those resources or you get those surveys, that you take 5 minutes and fill it out for us. Trust me when I say on the other end, it will be very beneficial for you. Not to mention that we can then share that with our federal partners and our state partners. It's amazing to me how many federal entities are reaching out going, FEMA wants to know, what do PSAPs need? The DHS needs to know, what is it that they need to do to help PSAPs? The legislature wants to know, what can we do to help 911 right now? We need to know those. The more information you can provide us, the better off we can be advocacy as well. So there's a whole host of amazing things that can come out of these surveys. So when you see these the next time around, which come out here in a couple of weeks, please take that 5 minutes to fill it out for us. It will be very beneficial on the other end. We plan to do it periodically, and hopefully at the very end, we'll have a nice comprehensive report as well. So you can provide that to your local entities, and they can see what you're facing across the United States.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Kent, with everything that's been going on and with your crew and just the whole story, I mean, wow. I was going to say amazing, and I'll say it, amazing. Not in the amazing that people usually think like, wow, that's awesome. It's just crazy is what I mean. The situation that, that you were dealing with and still, coming out of and everything. How are your dispatchers doing? How are you doing? And where do you move on from here as we continue on with this pandemic, as well as the situation that you've been working on?
Sure. I would say that, based on my conversations with our telecommunicators, we're all still pretty anxious about the unknowns. We've, I think, gained a lot of trust in each other. There was, some talk about people working at home. Well, our telecommunicators working in 3 different places where we don't have a supervisor in each of those places. I'm not going to those places to avoid cross-contamination. That just demonstrates that trust, and trust is a two-way street. I know that my team has to trust me just like I have to trust them. So I think that's a good take home from that. Personally, I'm doing pretty well. It's been, I don't remember the last day I had the full day off. I did, I think, only put in 6 hours this past Saturday, compared to about 10 to 12 on a typical day for the past month. I've got a great family, some of my personal concern. My wife is a cancer survivor who takes a daily chemotherapy drug, which puts her at a significant disadvantage when it comes to COVID or other infectious diseases. So we've tried to restructure things at home to better protect her. And then, I think we all are being a little more cognizant of the little things that we do for each other in the center, in our lives, in our neighborhoods. Our department on their Facebook page has encouraged kids to do little colored drawings and submit them in, and we do a little contest to see who's drawing the best tribute to an emergency responder, or tribute to a healthcare worker, or best flowers, or whatever. And just reminding each other of the joy in the simple things. It's a little thing, but we're wearing face masks in the center all the time, and those get uncomfortable after a while. So one of my friends had posted an idea that I don't know where he came up with it, but a little clip that you could put behind the ear bands, so that the elastic isn't cutting into the back of your ears. And I said, hey, I'd like to get some of those for our guys and gals. And how much do you want for them? And he said, for you guys, just come get them. And that's the kind of outreach that we've had. We've had a lot of our local businesses donating food. We had a couple of baskets of edible arrangements brought to the center, so there's fresh fruit. So not just the high carb, high fat foods that we all love, some healthy stuff too. But I think this new normal, I think it's important that we remember and go back to the basics, go back to taking care of each other at every level, the mental, the physical, the camaraderie, the family that we all are. And so Ricardo and April and Brian, it's been great to share with you all tonight. I consider you all part of my family, and I thank you for all you're doing to help us and to help our telecommunicators be successful in what we do.
Awesome. And again, thank you, the three of you, for joining me here tonight for round one of the Dispatchers Roundtable. This is a show, for those who are listening, watching, that I'm going to be doing twice a month, with all the other stuff that I have going on. So this one is only going to be twice a month. But thank you again. If you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, or you have a topic for this show, please send an email to wttpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. If you are looking for any bonus content or swag, all types of things that I have going on over at Patreon, you can check that out as well. That is patreon.com/WTT podcast. And thank you all for the support there as well. It's what helps continue all of these shows going on. So thank you very much for that as well. This live broadcast of the Dispatchers Roundtable has been sponsored by Rapid Deploy and supported by INdigital, a leader next gen core services. And this episode will also be part of the podcast that goes out weekly. And that'll be coming out in a few weeks. That'll be heard. You can hear that 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Thank you all again very much. Also, Rapid Deploy is going to be doing a live Facebook broadcast on a similar topic of virtualizing 911. They're going to be doing that from their Facebook page. That'll be tomorrow, which is what the days are meshing together. The 9th. That's the 9th tomorrow at I think it's at 12 p.m. Central when they're going to be doing that. So make sure to check that out. And also join me tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern on Facebook and Twitter for Open Mic Live, where we visit the lighter side of dispatch. Have your stories ready. If you have any audio clips that you want to send in, send them to the same email, wttpodcast@gmail.com. I can edit anything out that needs to be edited out, or you can just send in one of those funny clips, because that's what that show is all about, where we take an hour out of our time to forget the bullshit that's going on in the world and just be there together in support and laugh at the lighter side of 911. Thank you all once again, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a good one.
Thanks.